Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my daughter won't let me get married. I, 42 female, am getting married this year. I've known my fiancé for 3 years, and he proposed to me on New Year's Eve. I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. My fiancé has a 13-year-old daughter. Our kids have known each other since the beginning of our relationship, but my daughter just can't stand his daughter. On the other hand, my son likes him and has never had any issues with his daughter. I can't understand the reason, but everything his daughter does is criticized by my daughter. I've talked to my daughter about it, and all she can say is that the other girl is annoying, childish, and she even calls her names. I really can't grasp the problem. I find my future stepdaughter sweet and bright. I've never had any issues with her. My daughter also doesn't like my fiancé. She says I could find a much better man. I've talked to my daughter, and she simply says that she thinks he's dumb and arrogant. After my fiancé proposed and I accepted, I told my kids, and my daughter didn't like it. I expected this reaction. When she met my fiancé, she was extremely rude. I reacted and sent her to her room, where I told her to stay quiet and that her opinion doesn't matter to me. I'm getting married, and she has to accept it, just like she has to accept sharing a room with her new sister. She had a crying fit and hasn't spoke to me for days now. I told my sister and my mother, and they say that I'm in the wrong. I can't see how I am, though. I'm an adult, a mother, and I decide whom I marry, not a teenager who knows nothing about life. Am I the jerk? Edit. I told her she had to accept it, and her opinion didn't matter because for the past 3 years, I've been trying to understand her reasons for being against my relationship, and she has never stated those reasons. So now, I'm getting married. And for those who said I didn't make an effort to build a relationship between my stepdaughter and my daughter, my son travels alone many weekends with my fiancé while my stepdaughter comes to stay with us at home. Even so, my daughter barely interacts and says it's disgusting for the two of them to travel together for hunting. You're the jerk. You just straight up told your daughter you don't care about her and her feelings. I had my ex-mom do that too. I haven't spoken to her in years. Instead of saying her feelings don't matter, get some family therapy and some individual therapy for her before you lose your daughter forever. Also, do you think maybe she's having a hard time sharing her mother with someone else and feeling a bit competitive? Has your man actually taken the time to try and bond with your daughter? I once told my mom how uncomfortable that guy she married made me feel, and she ignored it. Well, he mistreated me. It sounds like you might be missing some crucial interactions between those two. And it makes sense that he gets along with your son because now he gets to be a boy dad, but he already had a daughter. It's not too late to turn this around and work on your relationship with her. Not to mention, she's being forced to share a bedroom with her stepsister. So you want to know if you, the adult, as you keep pointing out, are a jerk, or your 14-year-old kid is a jerk who's having her entire life turned upside down against her will and is being forced to share her space, her actual room, with someone she has expressly made clear that she doesn't like? You told her the moment she met your fiancé to stay quiet and that her opinion doesn't matter. Wow, I wonder why she doesn't tell you anything. Her opinion doesn't matter, so why should she bother? You have a right to a life, to be happy, to find love, but the way you're acting is going to guarantee that this never gets resolved and you are destined to have an unhappy daughter, stepdaughter, and likely marriage. You're the jerk. Not the jerk. Your daughter messed around and found out. She's the kid, not the adult. She doesn't get to decide who you marry. Her opinion of him is irrelevant, and you weren't in the wrong to lay down the law with her. These kids on Reddit would side with your messed up daughter no matter how you told this story. Don't feel bad about any of this. Hopefully your daughter will move out at 17 and you won't have to deal with her anymore. I understand that growing up without a father can really mess kids up, but your daughter is just a lost cause at this point. And I can already tell she doesn't like your fiancé because she knows she won't get to make the rules anymore once he's living there also. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her daughter? Please let us know. Friend wants to use me as her backup ATM plus new updates. Next month, I, female, am going away on vacation with a longtime friend. We're going to the Caribbean for 5 nights. It's not all-inclusive, so we will be responsible for paying for food, drinks, and our activities. She asked me how much I was bringing in cash. I said $300 cash plus credit and debit cards. She told me she's going to bring $300 cash, but no debit or credit cards. She said she's on a budget and $300 is her limit. I explained that comes around to only $60 per day. This is not one of the cheaper Caribbean islands, so food and drink alone won't leave her with much left over. I reminded her that she needs to factor in cabs, incidentals, or any other activities we might want to do. And you never know if an emergency will come up where she will need money. She says to me, "That is why I have you," and starts laughing. That ticked me off. I tell her that we are both adults who are responsible for our own selves. It would be one thing if she lost her purse and needed money. I would float her money before she even had time to ask. But to purposely use me as her backup ATM is not going to work. I told her now that I know what she's up to, I'm not going to go along with it. If she runs out of money, she'll just be stuck and hungry. She needs to bring her cards with her for her own good. She's now telling me that I'm too harsh, and she will bring extra money but no cards. I told her to do what she wants, but if there is an emergency, she's on her own. Make sure she doesn't charge anything to the room. OP. Good point. I will tell her I'm not putting down my card for the room. Either she puts her card down or we both put down cash. That will eat into her spending money. She's going to hate me. Can you book your own room? OP. The room is already booked. I'm not going to give her a nice room at half price and I have to spend on another at full price. Be sure you hold the boundaries you set. OP. I am. The fact that she had no shame in admitting it and laughing is what ticks me off. So I will have no shame in holding my boundaries. Update. 1. Some of you said that the hotel would want a credit card on file from the person who made the reservation. My friend was the one who booked the vacation. She put the whole thing on her credit card because she wanted the card points. I told her because the reservation was booked through a third-party app, the hotel would need the original card used to make the reservation. So she was on the hook to bring her credit card. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it sounded good based on what you all commented. She was not happy that her own greed got her, but at least she brought a credit card. Others mentioned that she was going to sulk, and sulk she did. When we got to the airport, I told her I was not going to spend the vacation in her misery, so let's hash it out right now. She said that my tone was very rude, as if I was accusing her of trying to mooch off of me, which she was. I told her to put herself in my shoes. She was deliberately not being responsible and told me to my face I was her backup plan and laughed about it. It made me feel used and put upon. She apologized and I apologized for being so harsh. Some of you said she would try to be content with cutting corners. Cabs were expensive on the island and they didn't take credit cards, so she looked up how to take the local buses. I was fine with that until we waited 45 minutes in the heat for a bus to take us to the mall. Yep, we only took cabs after that. A few mentioned that she would go through her cash in the first 2 days. You were close. It took her 2.5 days. There were several markets with local jewelry and crafts that she absolutely loved and they only took cash. So she ran through her money rather quickly. She only brought her credit card, not her debit card. So as someone suggested, I made her send me right then and there the money I took out of the ATM for her. She paid for the exchange and ATM fees. She tried it with the meals. She ordered something big and wanted to split the bill evenly. Normally I wouldn't nitpick about that, but I just didn't want her to feel like she still got one over on me in any way. Since she used her credit card for meals, to save the cash she had, I paid what I owed in cash and she paid the rest, her higher portion, with her credit card. Overall, we had a good time. We did a few excursions, had shopping and beach time, and relaxed. She even told me it was a good thing she brought her credit card. Things only got weird when I asked her to send me right then and there at the ATM before I gave her the cash, but she knew why I was being so hard-nosed about it. Update 5 months later. Zena is now going on a Christmas cruise with a group of her friends. Her cabin mate, the same one who told me that I was being mean and stingy, just texted me about Zena's plan to only bring cash, no debit or credit cards for their upcoming cruise. Since the cruise is all-inclusive, including unlimited drinks packages, Zena feels she can get away with it this time. The cabin mate wants to know what I did to get Zena to bring a credit card on my vacation with her. I never laughed so hard in my life. I haven't answered her yet. I want to respond with, "Don't be so mean and stingy," but I'm electing to stay out of it. Just wanted to share that update. Mom changed wedding cake behind my back. My fiance and I are getting married this fall, and the cake has been a huge point of contention with my mom. Long saga, but the gist is that we wanted a dessert bar or a cheesecake instead of a traditional cake. My mom initially insisted on having at least a small cake for just us to cut. We compromised and got quotes. Right before we put a deposit down, she decided that having just a cake for us and not for guests is tacky, so we had to get a sheet cake to serve as well. We were annoyed because she was the one who suggested it, so we cut our losses and opted to do tiered cheesecake and mini cheesecakes as we originally wanted. My mom would not let this go for the past 6 months. She then decided to focus on pushing for a groom's cake. My fiance did not want one. When I told her this, she said it's really only a groom's cake in name and not about what he wants. I told her a firm no multiple times because she wouldn't give up. That brings us to this week. I got a text yesterday saying she was at the bakery and paid for the order. I got suspicious because I never included her in those communications. I called the bakery today and was told by a very apologetic employee that my mom had added a multi-tiered groom's cake with different fillings, flowers, the whole kit and caboodle. We still have the cheesecake, but I feel like it'll look silly next to what is essentially a wedding cake. My question now is, what do I do? She doesn't know that I know. I'm furious and I'm hurt. Obviously, it's just a cake, but it's not really about that now. She went behind my back and crossed multiple boundaries after I told her no. Am I being a bridezilla for not letting her have a traditional wedding cake? Why should she have a cake at your wedding? If you don't want cake, just change the order back and call it a day. And add a password for all of your vendors moving forward so changes can't be made without it. OP. Everyone I'm spoken to has either been in the camp of, well, they're paying for the wedding, or not her wedding, not her cake. I think that's why I'm torn, because yes, they are paying for it. But changing the order behind my back? I'm more upset about the violation of trust than the actual cake. It's not just a cake. It's a breach of your boundaries and your wishes. Cancel her order. Put a password on all of your wedding accounts. You are not marrying her, you're marrying your partner. OP. Exactly. It's the breach of trust that's been the most upsetting. I need to call back tomorrow and see if it's possible to cancel and get a refund since she paid in full. I suspect she did that intentionally, thinking she was being clever. Update. By the time I posted, it was too late to cancel the wedding due to deposits and contracts, so it continued as planned. And to clarify, yes, my parents did pay for the wedding, although my husband and I made it clear several times that we did not expect or need them to pay for everything. No, I don't think them paying excuses my mom's actions. My parents reiterated that it was our wedding and we should do what we wanted. Clearly, the cake was the exception to this, though she had previously said to get cheesecake if that's what we wanted. My husband and I got a laugh out of everyone's suggestions for how to handle the cake. Initially, I wanted to go to the petty route and surprise my mom by calling the bakery to change the cake design to something she would find tacky that would reflect my husband's hobbies. You know, like a groom's cake should. After taking a few days to weigh my options, I knew my desire for petty satisfaction would nuke my relationship with my mom, which had truthfully never had this dynamic up until wedding planning. I knew that she absolutely was the one in the wrong and acting like a child. And while I'm the actual child in the relationship, I wanted to be mature and handle this like an adult, if only for my own moral high ground. I communicated with my parents and listed all the reasons why this situation, and others throughout the wedding planning process, was hurtful and completely out of line. Shock of the century to everyone on Reddit. It didn't go well. There was a series of texts I received from my mom that demonstrated she couldn't take accountability or comprehend that I wasn't mad that she ruined my wedding by ordering a cake, but rather that she went behind my back, knowing it would surprise and upset me on my wedding day. I attempted multiple times to redirect to the actual issue with little success. We ended the conversation with her apologizing for a cake, making my husband and me so upset. This obviously wasn't a genuine apology or the main issue, even if she thought it was. She also agreed to move the groom's cake to a meal we had the day before the wedding, which I was fine with. At this point, we were a week out from the wedding, and the thought of continuing to press the issue was too much for me to handle with everything else on my plate. I dropped the rope leading up to the wedding so I could refocus on enjoying my wedding as best as I could. I interacted with my mom as little as possible the day of and our wedding party. While I've had some contact with her since, it has dramatically declined so I can get some much needed space. Obviously, we'll need to have some tough conversations, but I'm choosing to spend my time with my new husband and getting back into therapy first. Weddings, man, they really bring out the crazy in people. Oh, and the cheesecakes were a huge hit, by the way. Am I the jerk for being upset with my significant other for being friendly with my high school bully? Plus updates. Me, 26 male, and my girlfriend, 26 female, met in high school. We became really good friends. She was basically my only friend in school and decided to go to the same university so we wouldn't drift apart. When we were in university, I finally asked her out. We started dating since. To sum up my time in high school, it was awful. I was very lonely, introverted, and quiet, both in high and middle school, so I was prone to getting bullied. I was mostly bullied by this one guy, let's call him Lewis, and his group of friends. He would poke fun at my eye condition, intentionally embarrass me, and make me uncomfortable in front of everyone, calling me all kinds of names and just made my life in school horrible. This was horrible because school was supposed to be a safe place for me, because things were horrible at home. But he ruined any chance of it being a safe space by making my everyday terrible. My girlfriend was aware of the bullying situation at the time, and when we became closer friends, she always comforted me about it and sympathized with me when I vented about it. She agreed that they were cruel for no reason and I didn't deserve it at all, told me she hated them for hurting me like that. Fast forward to now and what the problem actually is. We were out together walking the dog, and I told her I'd jog to a nearby store real quick, pick up some cigarettes, and come back while she stayed at the park. When I was walking back, I noticed her talking to someone from a distance. She seemed to be all cheerful and laughing. They talked for a bit and he walked away in the opposite direction, so I came up to her and asked her what was up. She nonchalantly smiles and tells me that it was Lewis from high school. My heart sank. Not gonna lie, I awkwardly chuckled and said, "Whoa, you were seriously that happy to talk to him?" She says, "Sure." I told her, "You do remember he was the person that basically made my life horrible in high school, right?" She said, "Yeah, I remember, but I'm sure that he's changed and he seemed really sweet. Come on, don't be like that." I got pretty mad at that point and didn't say anything. She noticed the awkward silence and said, "Aw, dude, come on. Do you seriously still have a grudge against him? I thought you would be over it by now." Wow, that hurt me so much. It's not easy to get over years of what was done to me in high school. It was so hurtful to hear that coming from her, especially because she was my rock during the times I was getting bullied by everyone at school and home. I don't still hate the guy and his friends after all this time, or want them to suffer or whatever, but it's not easy at all to forget what they did to me. Sure, maybe they changed for the better, but seeing her talk to him so cheerfully and tell me about it really hurt me inside. Am I the jerk for this? Not the jerk. No matter what everyone is saying in the comments section, you're not the jerk for this. It's normal for you to be taken aback, having to witness your girlfriend being friendly with your bully. In fact, you weren't even being rude about it to your girlfriend. You merely asked and then stayed quiet when she responded. While I understand that it's not like she could have gone off on him that day, she was just being polite. She literally invalidated your feelings. You don't tell a victim to get over it or even presume that they should be over it by now. You're not overreacting. She's the jerk. I'm sorry. Update. I thought I should post a follow-up since tons of people saw the other post and are probably wondering what happened. Basically, everything was kind of tense between us after we went home yesterday. When I woke up next morning, my girlfriend told me we needed to talk, and I agreed. I was going to ask her first, but she beat me to it. She asked me if I was still upset about yesterday, so I told her that I was and explained that hearing that he's a sweet guy from her was really painful, especially when she knew about the stuff that he did to me. I told her that being friendly like that towards people who tormented me wasn't something I accept, and obviously explained that her "get over it" comment was out of pocket and unnecessary. I told her how him becoming a better person was kind of irrelevant to me. No matter how much he changed, the consequences of his actions will still stick with me. She listened to me explaining, and she started crying in the middle of it and said she was incredibly sorry and that she didn't think too much of it at the moment and failed to consider my feelings. She said after I explained it from my point of view, she realized she was being the jerk, and it was a stupid assumption that everything I had would just go away and I would forget about it. We understood where each of us were coming from, and I forgive her. She was very genuine about it. I know she's not a malicious person and wouldn't want to intentionally hurt me, even if it did hurt. There was a bunch of people telling me to break up with her in the comments, and I see why to some other people this would be a complete deal breaker. But in my opinion, relationships obviously come with their ups and downs, misunderstandings, conflicts like this one. So I want to forgive her and move on, especially when she realized that what she did was wrong and she apologized. If she hadn't, it would be a completely different story. She told me she doesn't want to keep contact with him after this and doesn't care about him at all. Even told me she wants to block him on the socials they exchanged, and I said that was up to her. So far, everything seems to be okay, and I feel like this helped our relationship in terms of setting boundaries and respecting them, and I'm glad we were able to talk it out. I also wanted to say I've been considering giving therapy another try for my own good. Might find a new therapist and try again. Hope that works out as well. I'm leaving everything I own to my goddaughter instead of my daughter. I, 45 female, divorced my ex-husband when my daughter, Kelly, who's 21 female, was around 12 after I caught him cheating for the second time. Literally everyone was against it, and I knew the in-laws wouldn't like it because they're traditional conservatives who didn't want to deal with a public scandal. But it was hurtful to me that my own family was trying to pressure me to stay in the marriage in order to not lose access to the money and perks my ex had provided. Examples: while we were married, my ex helped my brother get a nice job with a high salary and nice benefits, paid off my sister's credit card debt, and bought my parents really lavish gifts. The first time I caught him cheating, I wanted out back then, but my family convinced me to forgive him and that I owed it to Kelly to fight for her to have the stability of a two-parent household. My daughter was only a few weeks old at the time, and I was in a very vulnerable state at the time, so I agreed and felt stupid when my ex did it again. This time, I wasn't going to be deterred and continued with the divorce. In truth, I wanted to keep Kelly out of this as much as possible, but my in-laws and my own parents turned her against me by painting me as a hypocrite for telling her how important forgiveness is, but that I wasn't willing to forgive Daddy even when he was really sorry. I was distraught. I honestly don't think I would have made it through it if it weren't for my best friend, Tina, who was my rock. In the end, I got a nice settlement and some alimony, but didn't get custody. I tried my hardest to still be in Kelly's life, but by the time she was a teen, she was fully convinced that I was the bad guy and told the courts she didn't want to see me anymore. I was heartbroken, but kept reaching out. During that time, I also managed to go back to school. I was studying accounting and managed to get a high-paying job of my own and have a nice life for myself. The same can't be said for my ex, who was sued by a former employee and fired by his company. Because he was so embarrassed, my ex burned through his savings trying to keep up his lifestyle, which included Kelly's college fund. Suddenly, she wanted contact again, and I won't lie and say that I wasn't hurt at the idea of her only wanting contact was for my money, and agreed to pay for her to go to grad school on the condition that she sign an agreement that she won't contest my will, where I'm leaving most of what I owned to Tina's daughter, Laura, who's 18. The few relatives that I'm still on good terms with think that this will damage any chance at rebuilding a relationship with Kelly and that I should just split everything equally. However, I don't want to have the type of relationship with Kelly that I feel like I have to pay for. Am I the jerk? Edit. 1. I didn't get custody, but I did get visitation, and when Kelly was 14 to 15, she told the courts she didn't want to visit me anymore. 2. My ex came from money and had a good income, which meant he had better lawyers and the aid of my brother and parents during the divorce. 3. Not too long after the divorce, my brother lost his job. I'm not sure what happened, and I never cared to ask. 4. I'm no contact with my brother and very low contact with my parents and sister. 5. Tina is my documented POA should there ever be a situation where I can't make legal decisions for myself and vice versa. 6. Alimony is not child support, so that's why I was able to get it. Not the jerk. Your daughter has always been against you because of your family, and now the moment when things aren't looking good, she wants contact. Ignore her. And your family basically wanted you to stay because they wanted his money. Not the jerk. I don't understand the entitlement where kids think they are owed what their parents had after they pass. None of what's yours belongs to anyone else unless you give it to them. And if that's a problem with someone, then it shows where they see the true value in a relationship with you. If you want to leave everything to your goddaughter, do it. If that's an issue for your biological daughter, then that should cement what you're already thinking about why she's reached back out to you in the first place. It hurts, and I empathize with that. Just know you aren't obligated to do anything you don't want to in this situation, despite the guilt and judgment you may face. Well, what do you think? Should OP leave anything for her biological daughter or just her goddaughter? Please let us know. I'd leave biological daughter $1 in my will. That way she can't try to fight for anything else. I was told to do what an executive told me in a precast concrete plant. Some background first. I worked for a precast concrete company as a job in between high school and college. The job sucked, but it paid well. We made a lot of the massive storm culverts and tunnel pieces that are dropped in place during construction instead of being made where they are. To put this in perspective, our largest casting form could handle pieces 40 feet by 30 feet. Absolutely massive pieces. After a few weeks of working for this company, I was trained to run the industrial concrete mixer and did this every day. This mixer was 3 stories tall, mixed up to 4.5 cubic yards of concrete at a time, and was the most beat-up machine in the entire plant, which was saying something. It ran 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day, and was never maintained because the company couldn't get techs to come out on Sunday, its only day not running, and didn't want to lose a work shift to get it maintained. The only good thing about it was that all the materials were weighed and fed in automatically. All it took was a button to start the process. The most common problem was the bottom release door not sealing correctly. It would be just barely cracked, allowing all the water to run out of it, resulting in an unusable chunky mess that would need to be dumped in a scrap hole instead of being used. If this happened, the mess needed to be dumped out of the mixer quickly before it could partially harden inside the mixer. This only happened once that I was there, and it took an entire shift to chisel the stuff out. We put a mark in the sliding door to show where it should be versus where it would be when it didn't seal. The process worked like this. A cage of rebar and anchor points was constructed on a base around a core and a form bolted around it. The QA guy signed off, and the form was then filled with concrete and left to cure. The curing time largely depends on the ambient temperature. The hotter it is, the faster it cures, and vice versa. Once the piece has cured enough to be lifted, the form is stripped and the piece lifted by crane off the core. Repeat until you have as many pieces ordered. Another thing to note is hard hat colors. They were color-coded according to your role. Blue are plant supervisors, green QA, red the foreman, etc. For the normal workers, there was a choice of 2 colors. Yellow for people who don't know what they're doing, typically new or dumb people, and gray for those that do. This was about 5 months into my time with them, and I had just got a gray one maybe 2 months before. Onto the story. Our plant was starting to produce pieces at a substantially slower rate than the other plant owned by the company. We were working 10 to 12-hour days every day to try and make up the difference. Typically, multiple pieces were made per form, per day 2 to 4. We were only managing 1 and maybe 2 per form per day. To figure out the reason for this, the owner's plan was to send an executive from the main office to observe and time every section of the process in our plant. This in itself was silly. Remember how I said the speed concrete cures is based on temperature? Our plant was in an unheated warehouse in a state bordering Canada, in the winter. The other plant was in Florida. Can you guess why production was a bit slower in our plant? In any case, during the shift meeting before the executive got there, our foreman's exact words were, "Do what he tells you. Otherwise, stay the heck away from him." Wonderful. The shift proceeds as normal. Building cages and forms get bolted. Maybe 6 hours into the shift, I climb up on top of the mixer to the platform, and I'm greeted by the executive in the shiniest white hard hat I've ever seen, and office attire, complete with black dress shoes, in a concrete plant. He looked bored out of his mind. He asked me something to the effect of if I was looking forwards to the end of the shift in 2 hours. I told him that with no problems, we might get to leave in 4 hours. He got the most defeated look on his face and mumbled something that I didn't catch. I went through the pre-checks on the mixer and found the bottom door was once again not closing properly. I yelled down to the plant supervisor that the door wasn't sealing again and that the machine would be down until I got it to seal, normally by chipping the concrete left by the previous shift after using the mixer away from the opening. The plant supervisor yelled back a few choice words directed at the mixer and stormed into his office. The executive had a look and said he thought the door looked fine. I told him that it did this a lot and that it wasn't sealed, pointed out the mark to him, and went to get the tool I bribed a fabricator with energy drinks to make me to chip away the concrete. A braking bar welded onto a rebar shaft that I kept under the mixer itself. No more hunting down an air gun and going through confined space lock and tagouts. Just stand on top and poke at the concrete until the door moves freely. Upon coming back with the tool, the executive told me that the seal was fine and to run it. I pointed out the same things about the door not sealing regularly. I asked if they were sure. They replied in the affirmative. I started up the mixer. The mixer regularly threw a bunch of silica up into the air. With the water draining out the bottom, this was going to be extra dusty. I offered them an extra mask that I had, and they replied that they would be fine. Well, it's not my lungs. At the same time, I noticed the plant's heavy equipment guy walking into the building and got his attention and made the hand gesture for the front loader. I got a "what the heck" look from them, and they mouthed, "Why?" I pointed down at the mixer, repeated the gesture, and they threw their hands up and they turned around. The load went into the mixer. Water started draining out the bottom. Dust goes everywhere. Go figure. The plant supervisor comes out of his office, I assume after seeing the giant cloud on the cameras, runs over and says something like, "OP, what the heck are you doing?" The mixer is quite loud with concrete in it. I got the general gist though. I just pointed to the executive, who was now covered in dust and staring at the water pouring out of the bottom of the mixer. Never said a word. The plant supervisor's head swiveled and he just crooked a finger at the executive. The executive climbed down. They exited the building with the plant supervisor leading. The fallout. The front loader was able to get the mixer before the mess was able to partially cure inside it, so the cleanup was as easy as dumping it into the bucket and then dumping that in the scrap hole and spraying out the mixer. We continued the shift after I chipped the concrete away from the door and got it closing properly again. Not too much time wasted, maybe an hour. The foreman asked what happened later in the shift and didn't stop laughing for the rest of it. The plant supervisor talked to me afterwards, asked what happened, and told me he didn't blame me for that dumb jerk's mistake since he had said to do what the executive said. I never saw the executive again, and the plant supervisor never said what happened in the parking lot. I can only assume that the most this produced was angry phone calls and a lot of concrete wasted. I left about 3 months later, but I never heard anything else about slow production times from the main office. The lack of maintenance sounds very familiar to me. I drive ready-mix trucks. If we can keep it running until the next holiday, all is good. We have 2 slots of 2 weeks per year that the plant closes, so maintenance to the plant and trucks happens then or until it fails catastrophically and we're shut down by it.
Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.